We've got really three main segments here. This first segment, we're going to start with some logistics, who the Imaging Corps are, and some updates from NACC and some updates from Cerise. And then we're going to follow that by two different imaging sessions, one related to harmonization of imaging data, and then the second related to what's needed before we harmonize data is how we recruit and engage our community so that those imaging data end up here in the first place. So as we go, I wanted to start just by introducing the Imaging Corps Steering Committee. We are the newer kids on the block, not the newest, because I think Biomarker Corps is the newest, but we started in 2020, and we have had staggered term lengths since then. And so here is our current Imaging Corps Steering Committee. I have been co-chair for the last year and really want to thank Beth Mormino, who has been leading as chair, and also want to give a big shout out to Sterling, who was the immediate past chair, and really Beth and Sterling have been leading the way for many, many years since the beginning, so we owe a huge debt of gratitude to them. And we have two members that are going to be rotating off this year, so Charlie DeCarli and Don Chaturi. We're really thankful for all of your service and appreciate all of your contributions. And earlier this spring, we voted in 2 new members. It was an exciting vote. It was so exciting that we even had to have a second round we had a runoff. So that's how excited people are to be the Imaging Corps Steering Committee leaders, and we're thankful for that and hope to keep that energy alive. So we want to welcome our newest members. Let's see. Okay, so just want to spend a little bit of time going over what is it that we do as an Imaging Corps Steering Committee. We have monthly meetings with NIA and NACC. We are in charge of the agenda for the Spring Imaging Corps session. And we're really working on collaborating with each of the corps, with NACC and the NIA, and the program as a whole. And we collaborate very closely with SCAN and NACC to make sure those data are getting archived appropriately and then will be available to both the ADRC community and the community abroad. And we want to set 1 to 3 annual goals per year, and this is where we need your help, not only from the Imaging Corps Steering Committee members, but from all Imaging Corps leaders, as well as the general ADRC community, so we welcome your ideas and suggestions. Just to provide a little bit of history, so 2020 through 2022, we really spent a lot of time on understanding the site needs and barriers related to imaging, and we helped to support SCAN as it was starting up and its integration into the ADRC network. In the last year, we've been able to continue that coordination with SCAN and NACC, and then started some new initiatives, part of which you'll see in the last part of our session today, where we've been working with the OR Corps to think about outreach, recruitment, and engagement into imaging. And we want to promote more of that. And then we want to start using these imaging data. You saw earlier from Beth that there's tremendous potential, and there's tons of imaging that has come into the centers, and so we want to make sure that we're using that to generate new science. And another initiative that we've started but not finished is starting to centralize recruitment materials so that we can share with each other what's working, what's not, and how can we be helpful to one another. So just last but not least, just want to have that last call out to please reach out to us. We are an open group and want to receive your suggestions and look forward to hearing from you. Our agenda for today is, of course, in the NACC folders that you received and here. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome up Dr. Cerise Elliott.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk this afternoon about the administrative supplements and the outcomes of those supplements. And just to preface it a little bit, we learned a lot from these administrative supplements. We have opportunities to be more inclusive and have more strategies to implement imaging across the ADRCs. So overall, we have goals in the centers to perform cutting-edge diagnosis with imaging. And I think, in 2015, 16, we kind of understood, we understood you're under-resourced for imaging. A lot of the imaging continues to be done with supplemental awards or additional R01 awards that are affiliated studies with the centers. And so, we also kind of went into this field, this way in which the research diagnosis kind of requires an AT and classification, and that we think that the in vivo research diagnosis is the future. The centers, again, we spend lots of time summarizing what the centers are all about, and we kind of shared these bullets that, the centers have ATN scan standardized. If we do this standardized ATN scan protocols and work with the existing infrastructure for sharing, that we can include additional to have a broader dissemination and standardization of neuroimaging and other biomarker tools for diagnosing AD and ADRD. And I hope it's a priority for NIA. And we went to the next step to say it's such a priority that we're going to fund SCAN, which is standardization and centralization of neuroimaging, and it's funded to manage the collection of the standardized imaging data on your ADRC participants. And NACC has a responsibility as our coordinating center and our partner in managing the 37 ADRCs. It's responsible for managing the neuroimaging data in the repository and share the de-identified data for the PET and MR scans with investigators. And SCAN is working on giving you that summary data of the standardization. So those are our goals. I hope that you all know them and that we're supportive of imaging. And we started, as Emily said, we established this imaging steering committee around the same time. We use imaging steering committees or steering committees in general to get feedback and work through the network on the different topics. And starting in March 2020, their first assignment was like, test the waters. Are these people really interested in imaging? And so we felt that in the survey, we only got 23 respondents out of 31, but I thought the respondents felt that MCI was going to be the top group that in the clinical core, followed by odor controls, and then followed by AD. Also then, in the next table, what was the estimate that you could think that you would scan on an annual basis? And the majority of the respondents thought they could get between 20 and 100 subjects annually for amyloid and tau. And so this is, beginning of information taking that we were able to share at the March meeting and also share with leadership, where we advocated for the support of neuroimaging administrative supplements in fiscal year 2020. We provided 14 administrative supplements at $250K for 1 year. We wanted it to provide data for SCAN to test the pipeline and for NACC to develop the sharing interface. We felt that at $250 direct, we could get about 25 ATN scans per administrative supplement. We needed scanning participant justification. You could include other biomarkers, but we expected that the $250 was only going to cover neuroimaging costs. And we highlighted that we wanted a diverse and/or unique cohorts. And overall, we provided funds at $5.6 million for these administrative supplements. And we all know what happened in 2020. I'm not going to deny that COVID was a challenge, but also it's 2023, and I actively pinged you 3 times to tell me of those 14 supplement winners what your progress was. We did it in April of 21, October of 21, and really truly February 23 is the last time I'm going to ask. So this is why I'm presenting you the outcomes of these supplements, and it's good data that we got. So here is a timeline comparison for the supplements and a list of the institutions that got supplements. And the green the institutions with the green line are complete as of February 23 based on their report that they turned in March 23. And you can see the timeline in which they were able to say that they were complete. The other 7 are institutions that are still in process of completion, and based on their February 23 reports, they have summarized how they intend to complete their work in the time frame that is listed here. And so hopefully by the end of the year, calendar year of December 2024, the 14 sites will have completed all enrollment based on their imaging supplements. And we will have that work complete, and we will be able to provide a nice summary to leadership of the work that you did in these 14 administrative supplements. Overall, a total of 795 participants have been enrolled as of April 24th, 2023. And you see the numbers for the completed enrollments and the enrollments remaining in this histogram. I think that you guys were very honest and truthful in the 3 time points of the report that you provided us. And I think that putting out the administrative supplements overall was a positive experience, and COVID being 80% of the reasons why things were delayed, with varied operational dates happening for each of those 14 sites. There was a lot of learning happening on the implementation challenges for neuroimaging. I think that a lot of sites thought that their infrastructure would support this supplement, and found out that maybe I don't have all the resources that I need. So these are some things that I've listed, and Nina showed a little bit yesterday, just about there was some underestimating about equipment. There was agreements in place to have new scanners, and the acquisitions were delayed. Some realize that there's aged equipment, or certain departments own the equipment, and there was a usage capacity and availability limitation for the equipment part. Also, some found recruiting difficult. Maybe there needed to be some more participant education about PET imaging, scheduling conflicts, cancellations. People were being slow to recruit, and maybe the diversity and getting diverse populations were harder. Staffing, I heard many things about staffing. There was lots of turnover due to COVID. The schedulers found a difficulty to schedule. Their imaging technicians left. There were turnovers and shortages of staff, and a lot of the imaging centers did a long period of shutdowns during the 3-year period between August and the present. Also, I think during 2021, we uncovered radio tracer challenges, that there are procurement delays, production failures, radio pharmacy limitations. And I feel that you voicing these concerns to the steering committee over the past years, have given them a wealth of work to do and think about, and hopefully for the better, make plans forward. Also, there were communication challenges. What we thought we wrote really great things didn't get interpreted out into the field. So there were, delays in MR and PET certifications. There were some confusions about the protocol. Scan startup started in January of 21, and we set the expectation that the imaging that you're doing at the center from January 21 to the present and the future will hopefully be all scan compliant. Also, there's a differing levels of interest in PET imaging, especially as blood biomarkers might, pave a new way. And so there's a varied level of prioritization of PET imaging at different institutions. Some institutions are lacking that infrastructure for adoption, and that's like another challenge that was identified. But I think the most immediate kind of challenge that we as a group need to understand is these parallel initiatives. And I feel that in some of the reports that I read, there is a conflation of recruitment success. And we have to write a better definition of COLE enrollment, because if you have 3 grants, and 3 grants are going to pay you to get 50 people each, we are expecting 150 people to be imaged. We're not expecting the same 50 people to be submitted for each of these 3 grants. And we really need to make sure that that is not the case as a definition of COLE enrollment. And I think that with the Imaging Steering Committee and NACC and kind of the leadership of Nina and myself, we're going to kind of make sure that we have the same definition of COLE enrollment moving for the future. And especially, as you heard during the clinical core session and all the other sessions at this meeting, there are multiple opportunities to leverage what you do at the centers, and we need to make sure that the right population is being actually like all the leveraging is going in the right direction. And so that's kind of what we need to work on for fall. And so I think that will be a topic for the fall meeting. So I appreciate all of the 14 institutions that put in their time for a progress report and were open and honest with their challenges. And I feel that we have a whole list of opportunities to improve for the next year for Emily and the team at the Imaging Steering Committee. And thanks for your time.
Our next speaker is Dr. Sarah Biber from NACC.
Okay, thank you all for the opportunity to speak today about our work on SCAN. So many of you are familiar with SCAN's mission, but the SCAN initiative is focused on collecting large quantities of standardized imaging data, integrating it with other data modalities that are available at NACC, and sharing it with researchers everywhere around the world to advance the field. So I want to share that. So NACC, Bill Jagast and Cliff Jack and team are doing an amazing job with SCAN. We joined forces with them back in January 2022 in a bigger way to help support their work. And our primary goals in our involvement were really to help identify and address barriers, facilitate ADRC participation, support data quality, as well as provide data access. And with point 3, I do want to say that Bill and Cliff's teams do an amazing job of doing all the data quality. NACC's role in all of that was really just to help make it easier for ADRCs to learn more about what images were passing and failing data quality. So I'll share a bit about that in a minute. So as far as addressing barriers, we interviewed 20 ADRCs between May and June of 2022. I think I had the opportunity to speak with a number of folks here. That was myself, Cerise Elliott, and Sterling Johnson. And we identified a lot of common barriers. I do want to say that my colleague Brittany Hale at NACC did an amazing job of wrangling all the things for these interviews and also helping to coordinate many other aspects of the work that I'm about to share with you. And we identified some critical needed solutions. So that would help address these barriers. So one was developing SCAN dashboards. You heard a little bit about that from Beth Marmino earlier today. I'm going to share more about it now. We needed to have a more rapid way to provide QC feedback back to the sites. And also, we needed a verification step at the time of submission. And so I'm going to share a little bit about our plans for that as well. So as far as facilitating ADRC participation, so we did several things to get this started. So one is that we developed and deployed a SCAN checklist, and 100% of ADRCs that we interviewed, all 20, said that they found this beneficial. And this was essentially a roadmap for sites to get scan ready, to try to really break down those instructions to a few simple steps. It's a standard tool for assessing scan progress and participation. It's actually based in REDCap, as well as it provides an opportunity for sites in a self-service way to update their readiness via REDCap. It's also incorporated into the scan PET and MRI manuals. So in addition, we have launched several scan web pages to help facilitate participation. So there's our main scan NACC data web page. We have a scan initiatives update page, which I encourage you all to visit, where we post regular updates about scan. In addition, that's where the scan public dashboards, which will be going live sometime this summer, will live. We also we actually just launched this before the meeting, a non-standard image submission webpage where you can learn about where you can submit your continue to submit your non-scan compliant images. So I encourage you to visit all those web pages. We make regular updates to them, and hopefully they'll be helpful. So NACC support has helped contribute to a dramatic increase in scan submissions over the past year. So we're up to 1,626 PET scans as of last March from 18 sites, more than 11,000 MRI scans collected from 30 sites. So these are major increases. There's been a huge amount of progress, 60% more sites contributing data. And a lot of this has been due to Cliff and Bill's teams, and we've tried to help support this as best we can at NACC. As far as supporting data quality, so you heard about this from Beth earlier, but and I introduced earlier your ADRC portals, which are each ADRC is going to have their own private portal within the NACC data platform where you can access, view, audit, download your data. And as part of that, you're also going to have access to PET and MRI QC dashboards. So we developed these in collaboration with the SCAN team and in collaboration with the Imaging Steering Committee. So sites can track the QC status of their MRI and PET submissions there, which allows them to rapidly address errors. It serves as an auditable record of all SCAN, MRI, and data submissions that have been submitted to date. And it's downloadable as a CSV file. So we hope that this will be really valuable for folks. There's a PET version that we developed with the team. You'll see in the yellow rectangles there, right? It's like, what's your QC score? If it didn't pass, why? So that folks can easily address any errors that are part of the system. There's a similar version of this for MRI that we developed with Cliff Jack and his team. So we also recently deployed an audit. Thank you all. It was completed by 100% of ADRCs. We really appreciate that. And we caught various errors that had been introduced in the system because of individuals at sites, putting in the wrong IDs. And so one of the things that we're working on really, we want to make sure that all this data is clean, right, obviously before we deploy it to researchers. And so thank you all for your efforts to resubmit that data that did have errors. We really appreciate it. And we want to make sure there's no opportunity to introduce more errors in the future. So we're actually working with LONI, SCAN, and the Imaging Steering Committee to make sure that there's a verification step built into that submission interface at LONI moving forward. So that's much, much harder to not put the right ID in. As far as providing data access, so I want to share a little bit about that. So in a couple of weeks, actually, we'll be returning your audited, cleaned up data to you at your sites via REDCap. So you'll be getting your own data back. So this is something we're really excited about to be able to provide to the community. But in the future, you'll be able to access that data via the NACC ADRC portals, as I mentioned, through the SCAN QC dashboards. And you'll also be able to access all of the SCAN variables there as well through your dashboards, through those portals. In addition to that, as far as sharing data with researchers everywhere, I mentioned earlier, and Beth mentioned earlier, that we're going to be making the SCAN analysis and metadata available through the NACC Quick Access files. That's this SUVRs and volume data that I mentioned. In addition, the raw images will be available through a LONI data request. In the future, we want to be making all of this data available through the NACC data front door, as I mentioned, both through our cohort selection tool, which is build your own multimodal data set. We want to be able to have that running. In addition to that, we hope to eventually be able to take advantage of the secure enclave features of our data platform so that folks can download their data sets into a secure enclave for analysis, along with any other data streams from NACC, which they want to be able to analyze. So that's future looking, but something I wanted to get on everyone's radar as an exciting potential future functionality. And some of these features are dependent on NACC's admin supplement that we've applied for. Really hope that comes through so we can keep progressing on this work. And this is really important, so I promised Cliff that I would say this. only submit, this is important notice to all ADRCs, only submit scan-compliant MRI and PET images to Scan and Loney. So this is where you can do it. You submit your scan-compliant data here. We have checklists for this, et cetera. It should be a streamlined process. If you need feedback, how it can be made more clear. We're all ears for that. We are going to be rebuilding our scan portal on our website, actually this summer as well. There's compliance details that are available there at scan.nacdata.org. Please also submit your you can continue to submit your non-scan compliant MRI and PET images, sometimes referred to as legacy images, to NACC. So we now have a new web page that clearly outlines how you can do that. So that's how that should be done. And once again, you can go to the Scan Updates webpage hosted on the NACC site to learn more about all of this. And I want to thank, obviously this work is led by Cliff Jack and Bill Jaggis and team. We've been happy to help support that and to work alongside the Imaging Core Steering Committee to help amplify this work even further. So thanks so much, everyone.
So now we're going to switch to our session on imaging harmonization, and our first speaker with an introduction to the issue is Dr. Donna Tudoroscu from the University of Pittsburgh.
Thank you. Thank you for the organizers for the invitation, and it's an honor to be here today. So I would like to start by saying that we are dealing with this data harmonization, and we're talking about today because we basically moved the neuroimaging studies from single site to multi-site images, and that comes with a lot of issues and a lot of challenges that we have to face. Specifically due to scanner differences, due to differences in the samples that we collect at each specific site, and then specifically for the PET imaging, we have the tracer issue that we're collecting subjects and we use different tracers to image the same issues that are going on in the brain. So I wanted to share with you some of the work that we've been doing, and I specifically wanted to look at these paired data. So what I'm showing here on this slide is 18 elderly scanned subjects on 1.5T, and then on a 3T scanner, they are 3 months apart, so there is no neuropathology that is going on in their brain. However, if you look at the data, you can see that the data on a 1.5T, which is shown in blue, and the data on the 3T scanners on these same subjects is very different across all three tissues in the brain. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that if you look at the table on the right, you can see that we have applied harmonization techniques that are out there and are available to us, one of them being Combat, which I'm sure you are familiar with, and the other is called Ravel, which is an intensity normalization technique, and then there is a combination of the two. As you can see, the differences are ranging from a 0.5% difference in the raw data with no harmonization to 12% differences for regions that are pertinent to Alzheimer's disease. And it's the same issue with the volumes. However, when we apply the harmonization techniques, that doesn't take care of it. So we still have some work to do with respect to development of methods. So now on this slide, this is actually the same participant, and I'm showing a slide from a 3T. These are all 3T scanners. However, it's a different manufacturer. So the data is still very, very different. The first row on the right side is showing intensities across the 4 scanners. We had a total of 20 subjects that were provided to us by Dr. DiCarli. But you can see that there is a lot of technical variability in the original images. And then there are some normalization techniques that you can use that are available, such as white stripes and some misspell harmonization that our group have developed. However, on the table with the mean and standard deviation of absolute differences for the cortical thickness and volumes, you can see across the methods that those differences are not going to be equal to 0. So no matter which harmonization technique we apply that is actually out there in the literature, we're still dealing with some issues that remain to be solved. Now, if we go and look at the PET data, so this is the Alzheimer Biomarker Consortium in Down syndrome. So PIB in the ventral striatum, which is the first region to accumulate amyloid in the Down syndrome elderly. So if we look from a statistical perspective, we look at the harmonized images using combat and non-harmonized images in terms of the sample size to detect effect sizes, to separate to see if there are differences between the Down syndrome and the controls. You can see that there are differences in the sample size that were required to detect these effect sizes. So this is going to make a huge difference as we move across, to these clinical trials. However, I think that what we've learned so far is that the targeted effect sizes that we should be looking for is not just the clinical effect size. We have to consider the technical variability that is in those images. I think that the methodological research is kind of lacking behind in terms of funding compared to the big data collection studies that we have. So we have to make bigger efforts to actually support this, technical differences, methodological developments. I also think that the statisticians should be included in the design, not that I have any bias in that. So the design should be appropriate. So I think you have to work with your statistician, because we've done a lot of training with respect to this kind of variability. I think that, in my opinion, the NIH should work closely with a committee of specialists to actually develop these specific standards with respect to what should we account for when we talk about technical variability in the scanners. And I think that as we account for biological factors, we should also account for technical variability, especially for treatment trials. And this is some of our work, and I would like to let Taki talk about MRI and Bill about PET.
So our next speaker is Dr. Taki Shinohara from the Penn Memory Center. Our next speaker is Dr. Bill Jagist from UC Berkeley.
Hello. I'm also obviously not there with you, but I am in spirit. So I'm going to talk about PET harmonization, and I want to talk about basically the approaches that we've been taking in a number of large-scale studies, as you all know about. And especially for PET, I think we can do a good job of harmonizing when we start to think about this at the very beginning of image acquisition. And so we have to consider tracer pharmacokinetics and standardize the times that we collect the data after we inject the participant. We have to think about signal to noise in a lot of ways. One of them is the injection dose, instrument resolution, and the reconstruction. And all of these things allow us to minimize the noise and to maximize the harmonization of images. And let me just explain for a moment why we're so concerned about pharmacokinetics. When you look at the actual PET image, and this is essentially a compressed version of what's happening over time, you see the intensity changes in different parts of the brain, and they look very different over time. And in fact, what you're seeing here is a tracer curve from two different brain regions, the cortex, which is our target region, and the cerebellum, which is our reference region. And you see the time courses of activity in these brain regions are very different, and they cross at a certain point, and then they reach a pseudo-steady state when they're essentially washing out at similar rates. And that's when we want to take our SUVR image. And if we take our SUVR image at different times, then the reference region ratio to the target region is different, and that is going to have a huge impact on quantification and harmonization. So we also have to harmonize the readout, and there are lots of different ways to do that. The main two fall into visual reads and quantitative outputs. Visual reads, of course, can be standardized and reliable, but they really require a dichotomous outcome measure that doesn't allow for the biology of the true disease that we're studying, and the quantitation may be more important for monitoring disease or treatment. Quantitation has a lot of advantages, but it tends to be complex. And what we have to do with quantitation, of course, is standardize the regions of interest we use for reporting and also standardize the scale. Now, this has been accomplished for amyloid imaging, and I just want to tell you a moment about how this process works. You've probably all heard of centiloids. It's been my experience that people don't really understand this very well, but it's really not very complicated. And it all comes down to a data set that's on the GAIN website, where a group of Alzheimer's disease patients and young controls have been studied and SUVRs measured. And we've translate those into centiloids very simply by taking the mean value of the Alzheimer group and the mean value of the young group and scaling every individual participant to that particular value by subtracting the mean of the young controls and normalizing it to the full range from the mean of the Alzheimer's to the mean of the young controls. And that puts everything on a scale of 100 to 0, 100 being the mean of the Alzheimer's patients. So now if you want to develop a new tracer, or if you want to use a new pipeline, what you simply do is get your new group of subjects, scan them with PIB, scan them with another tracer. In this case, this is the real data from the GAIN website for florbetaben. You have these different values for the PIB SUVR and the florbetapir SUVR, but since you've scanned the same subjects with both tracers, you can look at the regression for those two tracers. And then what you can do is take these PIB SUVRs and simply translate them to the centiloid scale by using the means of the Alzheimer's and control groups from this reference region. And that's the key. That's reference group. I mean, this is the group that is required for the harmonization of all the amyloid PET data. And once you have your data on this particular scale, it's the same regardless of what you do in terms of the data you collect or the way you analyze your data. And so what this requires is the GAIN data to scale the anchors and a new conversion equation every time there's a different tracer or if there's a different processing pipeline. But it works really well. So let me show you how this has been translated in a number of studies around the world. This is probably one of the largest, if not the largest, autopsy study in this case, it was PIB. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on methods, except that it was autopsy with two outcomes. One is CIRAD plaque rating, and the other is a measure of Alzheimer's disease neuropathological change. And you see for PIB, the one rating was 12 centiloids to differentiate non-sparse versus moderate to frequent, and this is 24 for AD neuropathological change. In the Alpha Plus study, it was 12 centiloids for PIB. These are kind of low, but when we look at the other values for florbetapir, 2 standard deviations above young control, 24 centiloids. This is an interesting method from HABS where they looked at the level at which cognitive decline starts, and it's 15 to 20 centiloids. This is florbetapir, again, a different study, 2 standard deviations above young controls, 20 centiloids. And florbetaben here, again, same method, 2 standard deviations or a Gaussian mixture model, again, around 20 centiloids. So I think we can question exactly what number is going to be right in any individual case, but it looks for the most part that above 20 centiloid scans are positive and below 10 centiloids, they're probably negative. So how does this work in the real world? But this is really an interesting study from Gil Rabinovich's group, who I'm sure you all know is leading the IDEAS study. And what they did is, this is a real world application of centiloids. This particular project used a very flexible protocol for image acquisition, basically according to guidelines that were published, which really had a much wider range than we use in typical studies like ADNI, for example. And what they found is that when they used 24 centiloids, they actually had a pretty good separation of these 2 different populations that you can see. Again, these are data that are collected with much more variably, and in fact don't have MRI scans. And here you can see that most individuals who fall above the 24 centiloid threshold had a positive visual read, but not all of them. And when you look at the discrepancies, you see relatively small, about 13% of cases were discrepant between the visual read and the quantitative read. And when you look at where those cases occur, these are the discrepant cases. They all occur relatively close to the threshold of 24. And in fact, this is a problem that occurs no matter what method you use. There are always going to be discrepant cases, and there are always going to be near the thresholds. And so this shows that this method is actually pretty robust to acquisition and pipelines. And once you sort of use this particular approach to develop a threshold, it seems to actually work. Now, we're not in quite the same space with tau, and for a lot of reasons, most of which, of course, is that tau PET came along later than amyloid PET. We're not where we are with amyloid PET. There's also a different issue, which is that amyloid is very forgiving because it's deposited very widely throughout the brain, and the selection of ROIs isn't as crucial as it is for tau PET. But the good news is that all the different tau PET tracers seem to have very similar patterns of uptake. And so what you see here is an approach to measuring tau uptake in specific groups of regions of interest that Victor Villamagne has proposed. You'll hear it called the Centaur approach, and there are large regions. There's medial temporal regions, this sort of metatemporal region, temporal, parietal, and frontal. And the good news is that we can use the same set of regions of interest for any tau PET tracer and get relatively similar results. So this is still early days, and I'm particularly thanking the Critical Path for Alzheimer's Disease and Antoine Luzzi, who are leading an initiative to try to harmonize tau PET in ways that are very similar to what's been done with amyloid PET. And so there are two general approaches that they've been taking. One is essentially like a centiloid, where we have a reference tracer, and then we would convert every other tracer to those equivalent units using an equation that essentially maps the SUVR to this particular scale. The other approach is a joint propagation approach, which uses all the data together in a single step, where you can essentially estimate all the data using a latent scale for all the observations. And in fact, both of these methods work and they yield similar results. And again, it's still early days, but this is some preliminary data that Antoine has produced with a head-to-head comparison. And what you can see is that the correlations between the two tracers are extremely high here using the Centaur approach with centiloids, and here using the joint propagation approach. Really the same results, very high correlation for the two tracers within the same subjects. And so how this is going to play out is still not completely certain, but you can get an idea of the direction it's going. And I think we're all fairly optimistic that because despite the fact that the off-target binding and so much is different about these tracers, the basic pattern of uptake is similar enough that we think we will be able to harmonize. So just to sort of end with how this works in our studies, I think you know that in ADNI and SCAN, we tend to use all of these approaches. We use a standard dose of tracer. We use a standard imaging time in order to try to harmonize the pharmacokinetics. We try to use a standard resolution. It's now 6 millimeters in ADNI and SCAN because the instruments have gotten better. Obviously, standard regions of interest for amyloid. This is less important. For tau, we're using the Desikin-Kiliani atlas from FreeSurfer. And for amyloid, we're reporting data in SUVRs and Centiloid. For tau, we think we'll probably end up using some format of this Centaur approach. So just sort of to end, and I think this is in a way probably the most important thing I have to say, is that no harmonization method is perfect. The trade-off is almost always the same. It's accuracy and reliability versus cost. And by cost, I mean time and money. And it can be more of one than the other, certainly. You have to really think about what you need for the goal of the study. If the goal is to follow treatment with a pharmaceutical intervention or follow change over time in a disease, you need to do things one way. If you need a dichotomous outcome measure, then certainly you can do things other ways. And there's no single one size fits all, in my opinion. So do you need thresholds for A+ or T+, or do you need continuous measures of pathology? And do you need to understand this in order to initiate treatment? And if you're going to do that, then obviously you have to think carefully about trade-offs between sensitivity and specificity, which is a topic I didn't even actually get into in this talk. So thanks for your attention. Glad to stay and answer questions.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So we horribly miscalculated timing. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to skip the panel discussion for this session and move on to our next the next session within the imaging course within this session. So let's thank all the harmonization speakers for wonderful talks. Thanks, Bill. And then I'd like to invite the speakers for the next session to come up. So we're going to transition to the recruitment of underrepresented groups into neuroimaging studies, site-specific experiences from imaging core leaders. I'd also like to invite Sophia Wang from Indiana University, who's also the chair of the OR Steering Committee, who's going to help co-chair this session. So as a reminder to the speakers, we're going to do 3 5-minute talks back to back to back, and then we'll have 15 minutes for discussion. So I really hope that the audience will engage with us at that time. So our first speaker is Dr. Charlie DeCarli from UC Davis.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all. We've been interested in diversity for quite some time, and in fact, our center mission statement is to advancing the science of healthy brain aging among diverse populations. I think this is relatively important to understand in that the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities Research framework, which was published, and I would recommend reading this in 2019 in the American Journal of Public Health Association, is to look at those things that characterize disparities and where does imaging come in. It comes in very nicely when we're talking about some of these biological issues and how they might serve us to understanding usually the consequences of other health influences, which include behavioral, physical, and social cultural. How does the UC Davis Alzheimer's Disease Research Center approach diversity? We started in 2000 to make this a primary goal of our center, and we've done it through active community-based outreach. We have between 2 and 4 community representatives that go out and do talks and do encourage involvement at the grassroots level. I think you heard from David Johnson maybe yesterday. He's actually trying to take this to another level, trying to bring in digital advertisements as well to broaden that. But I think it starts with the community, and it requires the necessary effort of shaking hands, talking, and one-on-one interactions. We use recruiters who are of the same cultural background and language. We ask the recruiters to do the consenting and to accompany the participants so that there is a continuum between what the participant sees in the community and the people they meet in the center. There's nothing more shocking than to be out in the community with a particular coordinator or recruiter and then come in and see a completely different group of people. We also hire drivers. Our catchment area is almost 200 square miles, but that's not the only reason. I think that drivers are really important, and we have culturally congruent drivers so they can discuss with the participants as they're driving around to do the various things that we need. We learned very early not to ask for things like Social Security numbers, not to write checks. We tried cash for a while, but that didn't work because it was really hard to trace. So we use cards, and that's been quite successful. And then I'm going to show you a couple of examples about how to to communicate what we're trying to do, and I have personally felt that infographics have been the best, and I'll show you in just a second. This slide shows is our first publication after the 10 years of doing this, and to show you all that we're able to reach out into the community and identify a large number of people and then proceed to bring them through a series of steps into the research program. And using this methodology, we've been fairly successful. Here's, oh, drats. It's much prettier. You are welcome to go on to our website. But that we say what our goal is, we say who we are, and we talk about why we want to do this. And this is actually only just like on half a page. And then the second page is what to expect. Okay? What does it mean? And then we follow this by online testimonials if people are interested. And in the last 30 seconds, I want to share with you the truth of the fact that this works. This is a plot of the average number of MRIs in our cohort across 4 different levels of cognition, and as you can see, a quite diverse population. So the result is you all can do it. It takes some effort. I think that this was brought out and continues to be brought out, that it does require that effort of the hands-on meeting the participants where they live and bringing culturally congruent individuals to be the, if you want to call it escorts, to facilitate the enrollment. When you do this, things work, and then it actually self-perpetuates. 15, 14, 13, no, stopped. It self-perpetuates because then you develop word of mouth. And then you don't really have to do that so much. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlie. Our next speaker is Emily Rogalski from Northwestern.
Hi, everyone. So we had a beautiful session yesterday on fostering inclusion, and I think that I'd like to think of this as an extension of that conversation and remind everyone that we're still at the beginning of this journey, not at the end, and we don't have all of the answers, but we're working to understand what works across sites, within certain sites, and now I'm going to ask you to take a step back. We talk a lot about Alzheimer's disease, and today I'm going to talk to you about someone else, people who are superagers, people who are doing better than expected in their cognition. So superaging is a term that we coined and have been studying these individuals for more than 15 years. And in 2021, the Superaging Research Initiative was launched and allowed us to become a multi-site study. And so I'll first just start by describing who are superagers and how do we characterize them. So these are individuals who are over age 80, that have memory performance at least as good as individuals in their 50s and 60s. And their performance on other cognitive domains is at least average for age. We're enrolling across 5 sites in the US and Canada, across North America, and 4 of those 5 sites are ADRCs who are partnering with us. People come in for biennial visits and will stay with us until brain donation. And our enrollment goals are 500 individuals, 300 superagers, and 200 controls of a similar age and demographics. And our goal is to enroll at least 40% of individuals who identify as Black or African American. Plus, we will roll over participants from the original superaging study at Northwestern, funded by an R01 through NIA. And I forgot to mention on that first slide, I want to thank all of our partners, the NIA, the McKnight Brain Research Foundation, and for their partnership in this work. So while MRI is a key component of the Superaging Research Initiative, the other charge that we had was to expand the depth and breadth of science that we do. So we're interested not only in MRI measures, but also in family history, medical history, socioeconomic factors. We have wearable sensors integrated. We are looking at blood-based biomarkers, neuropathology, transcriptomics, and these other markers, and so not to look at them as single silos, but integrate these data together. And so there's this opportunity to take individuals who are doing better than expected and understand how those protective factors and resilience can play a role in our understanding of normal aging, better than expected aging, and can also inform our understanding of Alzheimer's disease. So we've gone to each of our sites that just started enrolling within the last year to look for key themes. And it really starts with the community and ends with the community. And so when we start by that engagement and outreach, we're looking for educational opportunities. Those could come through events, but they really come through conversations and building those relationships with community partners and with the individuals in the community. We have listening sessions, we have focus groups. We assemble healthy brain presentations and MRI and PET brochures that are relatable. So a lot of the same themes that you heard yesterday and that you heard Charlie mention are there still. Staff liaisons, this was a point that you also brought up, Charlie, is that if you meet someone in the community, are they also the first face that you see when you enroll? Giving that community to research clinic connection. Educational opportunities, is there time and space for questions before the research visit, during the research visit, and after the research visit? Thinking of analogies that help to demystify the process. Reinforcing why we're asking them to participate and the importance of their participation. And then providing ways that we can to make things a little bit more comfortable. Is that showing a movie or listening to music during that MRI scan? And then finally, we want to keep those relationships going. So how are we giving back at the beginning, but still as we keep going? So opportunities to receive a copy of their research scan, sustained events. It turns out superagers really like to meet and connect with each other. And they want to understand how this relates to general cognitive aging and to Alzheimer's disease. These are dedicated individuals. They appreciate newsletters. In my last few minutes here, I do want to talk about a couple of barriers. One barrier that has come up is MRI fatigue. If they're also enrolled in ADRCs and asked to participate in other MRI research, it becomes a lot. Claustrophobia and anxiety are reasons that people are not interested in participating, medical contraindications, and then misconceptions, being able to explain that MRIs don't have long-term side effects. When we think about supporting the science of outreach, engagement, and recruitment in this space, we want to continue to not only live this work, but also document and share it with others. So we are working with our site stakeholders, we're working with our community partners, we're continuing to think about ways to give back. And then we're documenting and hoping to disseminate how we recruit adults who are over age 80. Our oldest living superager is 108, about to be 109, and thriving. That's a different population to recruit from, and I think we have an opportunity to fill some science gaps here. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Emily. So our final speaker is Annie Cohen from Pittsburgh.
I'm not tall enough to see my slides. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our lessons learned from the COBRA study in recruiting diverse populations. So our experience came primarily in 2015 when Jim Becker came to me and said, I want to propose a study with 400 individuals, 50% of them are Black or African American, and 50% of them will be men. And he said, and I want you to figure out how to do the recruitment. And I initially thought, well, you're insane, this is not going to work. Pittsburgh is an incredibly white city. It's a city that has very stark health disparities and quite a bit of segregation. And there's not a lot of trust in the healthcare system. So we began to think about how to do this. And this is also a longitudinal neuroimaging and cognition study with PET imaging. And so our goals were half women, half African American or Black. In our first study cycle, we only got to 237 participants enrolled. canceled because of our extended COVID shutdown. But what was exciting to us was that the COBRA cohort is about 53% African American, but predominantly women. Our African American group tended to be younger than our white group, but our primary recruitment sources were really interesting because initially we thought about using our Pitt ADRC, but then we identified a community online registry that I'm going to talk a little bit about that not only identified a large number of individuals interested in research from underrepresented groups, but also identified individuals who it was their first research experience. So we weren't bringing in typical research participants. So this online registry is called Pitt Plus Me. It was largely designed to think about diversity within the underrepresented groups that were being recruited in Pittsburgh, because typically the catchment area was right around the university, very high education, wasn't capturing individuals in the surrounding areas of Allegheny County, and was not as diverse even within those underrepresented groups. It really allowed us to focus on individuals who aren't participating in research studies, and it allowed us to do targeted recruitment through social media, bus advertising, flyers, and this is just an example of one of our advertisements that appeared on social media, where people could click and talk to schedulers about whether or not they were eligible for the study. In addition to that, we partnered with our community engagement centers, which are both in areas of Pittsburgh that are predominantly Black or African American, and this is done through the Center for Health Equity at the University of Pittsburgh. And what we did was we didn't go there to recruit. We went and we sat and we had dinner at the monthly dinners. We chatted with folks about what our interests were. We chatted with folks about what the community wanted from us. We never once brought a flyer. We never once talked about our studies. We just talked about what we did, and we talked to these individuals about what they did. When we thought about when we got to know these individuals, they gave us some really good information that I think we hadn't thought of in our privilege as a large research enterprise. One of those big things was lack of consistent means for contact for our participants. Most of you have probably had the same cell phone number for 10, 20 years. These are individuals who frequently change numbers because of the inability to keep a steady cell line. Often they don't have consistent internet access, so we really had to think about how to stay in touch with folks. And one of the things that we did was we called them frequently enough that they would shoot us a text when they had a new phone number. We also had to be really creative with our scheduling. Early mornings, late in the evening, times where people wouldn't have to take off work was really critical for us. And I think the other big lesson that I just wanted to talk about here that I thought was really a game changer for us was this need for a respectful education process about our research procedures, particularly with PET imaging. So I made an assumption immediately when we started to design this study that we needed to make PET imaging optional, that it was going to scare people off. And one of the things that we heard from individuals was that, don't tell me it's optional. That means to me that it's not important to you. Tell me why the study is important to you. And working with individuals for that education process really built a lot of trust within the community, and like Charlie said, talked about word of mouth, and had these individuals saying, you know, the PET imaging really wasn't as concerning as I thought it was going to be. It was interesting because I got a picture of my brain MRI. You know, the individuals started sharing these things out in the community. But I think it's really critical to not just assume that you have to forego particular procedures. I think focusing on the education process and that give and take with the community is really important. And then the last couple of things I'll mention are that we've really had to think through additional results disclosure options. We're thinking about that in terms of PET right now. We've been providing just a picture of people's brains from the MRI in the mail. And I kind of, at the beginning, thought this is going to be silly. No one's going to like this. People have loved it. It's been a huge hit, and they actually want to come back for their longitudinal studies just to get another picture of their brains. I'm not going to really talk about transportation. Our no-show rate was huge, but then when we switched to providing transportation for every participant, it got much smaller. Providing multiple meals, people are there for a long time. We give them cafeteria vouchers for lunch and dinner. We provide cards for compensation, but I think it's still a big issue, and I hope that NIH will start talking to our IRBs about how we can pay our participants more, and then also identifying additional resources for our participants. So utilizing suggestions that Jen Manley has been providing for a long time, utilizing social workers for psychiatric support, finding psychiatric support and care, finding child care options for individuals who have those kinds of responsibilities. And that's where I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank all our speakers for some really thoughtful conversations. Annie, I'm going to start off with you. I think one of the things that you really emphasized was the importance of why. And, you know, with every single procedure, we add on participant burden. So how do you kind of message succinctly the need to do all these procedures, especially with SCAN rolling out?
So I think that, for one thing, we very frequently start with a smaller ask and sort of build on that ask. So we'll tell individuals that, you know, we'd like you to come in for an MRI, and then we won't do the neuropsych until another visit when they're agreeable. And I was really worried initially with this strategy that what was going to happen was people were going to stop showing up. But our willingness to be flexible with those procedures and explaining why each thing was important and why continuing to show up for us was important made a huge difference in our participants' willingness to come. And we always end with the PET scan. That's sort of our last procedure in the cycle. And that's because we've kind of really built up to that trust with our participants. They've kind of agreed in theory in the beginning, but in practice, you know, we'll say, you can wait a month or two if you need to. We can have a little bit of lag between some of these procedures, and that flexibility, I think, has made a big difference in the amount of burden, because our studies, I mean, you're getting 2 PET scans, a 90-minute MRI, a huge amount of cognitive testing, so it really is a big ask. And we also divide up the payment. That's the other thing. At every visit, they get an additional payment, so instead of it being one lump sum, it's divided up.
So it sounds like having flexibility and really having an ongoing dialogue, so that way the burden is kind of spread over time, is really crucial. Did you find the same was true for your study as well, Emily?
We do also split our visits up over a series of days, understanding that it is a lot of testing, it is a lot of procedures, and that it couldn't be done all in one day. So breaking it up into at least 3 days at enrollment, sometimes more if that's better for the individual, is certainly helpful.
Charlie, you'll have some insight here from Diverse VCID with multiple sites. How have you worked it out with every single site? You know, you guys still have a lot of procedures even though you don't require PET.
Yeah, so I think that, well, one thing we do is we say that everybody who participates is important, and the flexibility is really critical. If they don't want to do the blood work, we encourage, but we say, you're so important, we'll let you do it without the blood work. The MRI is the only thing we ask them to do. The other thing is that we've created a library of resources that any site can use. And now we're actually taking it a step further, and we're engaging sites in research related to outreach. David Johnson has created this more toolbox and this digital media approach, and we're actually testing that and breaking it down into what does it cost to get a participant in community versus digitally, and it's turning out to be quite interesting. So we've actually put science into the recruitment.
I think that's great. Maybe that'll be a future conversation for the fall meeting. I think another big thing that sort of came up was community engagement. So, how much did you, it sounded like some of you may have gone directly, to the community. Did any of you use your ORCORs in the building of that, or did you just go directly out? I'm going to go now reverse. And Charlie, what are your thoughts there?
So we integrated the ORCOR oversaw, but that there are people who are in the clinical core as clinical research coordinators who go out, and we canvassed hospitals, we canvassed retirement communities. Just stand there and start talking to people. That was what worked best for us. And then you build in organized conferences or things like that. But it seemed to us that the best first approach was literally to go out in the community, just stand there and try to recruit people.
Emily, how did it work for you?
Yeah, so I think when this originally started 15 years ago, it was me spending a lot of time at libraries, at community events, at wherever I could connect with older adults. And then with time, as the Superaging Research Initiative was funded, at our site, we have community liaisons that are out in the community and also that are then greeting those individuals when they come in for their research visits. We do partner with our ORCORs, and across each of the 5 sites, in part of the reason they signed up and wanted to be a part of this is they had those relationships, and the ADRCs, this wasn't something new to them. It was maybe new to recruit people who were over age 80, but they already had started those community relationships, and so we're building on top of that.
And Annie, it sounded like you may have gone out a little bit because you talked about a community online registry. So can you maybe share a little bit more about how you formulated that?
Right. So the community online registry is run by our CTSI. And so we partnered with them, and along with our ORCOR as well, to identify resources. And one of the things I did with we have an amazing outreach coordinator in our ORCOR, and I essentially followed her around and went to community events and just watched and learned. And I would suggest anybody who's starting a study like this that you go with the outreach coordinators that are at your institution and see what they're doing, because these are people who have ties to the community, who know the community well, and you'll learn so much in terms of outreach for them. And so that was the first thing I did before we partnered with the CTSI, is I would just go with Melita and watch her work at these events and watch how she presented information to folks, watch how she worked with them. And that was really such a game-changing learning experience for me.
So it sounds like doing the community engagement part was really learning about a totally different skill set from neuroimaging, really putting those together and synthesizing that thought process was very crucial for your study being successful.
Oh, yeah. Imagers, most of the time I sit in a dark room in front of a computer, and so learning to actually go and communicate with communities was a whole new skill set for me.
And in hindsight, as we kind of reflect, what are some things that you would have done differently, Annie, as you started to approach the thing? You're like, should I have gone in sooner and watched folks? Did I go in too late? Like, what are some thoughts as you wish you had gone back and done something differently?
I think the two biggest things are that I would have tried to go into the community and just listen more than I did, and really one of the things I've learned is to kind of drop all of my preconceived notions about what people want or what they need. It's kind of a good parenting skill too, that every individual is unique and has unique needs, and you just have to listen to what those are, because we went in with a lot of assumptions about what people would and wouldn't do. And I wish I hadn't gone in with those assumptions, because I think in the beginning we had folks who really were unhappy with us, and thank goodness they voiced that unhappiness, because we could change strategies and really listen. And so I think that was the key for me, is like dropping all of that preconceived stuff, and I wish I had known to do that sooner.
Emily, any reflections on how you would have approached the process differently in hindsight?
Yeah, so maybe if I just think about some places, those opportunities for continued growth are word of mouth. So word of mouth has been a great source of recruitment over the years. People have come back to us and said, hey, we hung up a flyer about your study in our laundry room. We put it in our coffee shop or our gift shop of our assisted living facility or our senior center. And we just brought the super agers in for a photo shoot and video shoot because when we went to make flyers, it turns out there's only a handful of stock images out there of older adults where they don't look frail and sad, and that wasn't what we were going for. So all those images I showed you today were part of that photo shoot and video shoot. When those folks came in, they were self-assembling and already telling me that they were out giving presentations about super aging. I didn't even know about it. And they were then meeting each other and making more plans. But it takes time to cultivate those relationships, and so what I wish for is more time to work with those participants because they are great ambassadors, and I think that's a real opportunity.
Charlie, 30 seconds before we wrap up. If you had to do one thing all over again for Diversity CID, what would you do?
Spend more money. No, really, so we started off at just spending 50% recruiter. I'm 50% coordinator. We've added a recruiter because it boils down to being in the community. And then I just want to add one other thing, and that is that the other thing we've been extremely successful with is giving back. So we do a medical and a neurological exam. We comment on the medical part. Oh, by the way, did you know that your blood pressure is elevated? Oh, by the way, your sugar's a little high today. And then talk to them about, your MRI is normal, or on the rare occasion there's something going on. Then we literally say, okay, we're going to work with your doctor to make sure that you get the right treatment. And so people in our center, who now average about 6 times they've been through, come because they want to get their physical exam, and so they want to get their assessment. So I think it's so important to give back, and I don't think I think everyone wants that.
Well, I want to thank everybody for their time. I'm going to hand the baton back to Beth, and hopefully we'll continue this conversation in the fall with the ORIC Steering Committee. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly thank Sophia for joining us and our speakers both for this session and the harmonization session, and thank you for your attention.